All right, guys, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to start working on our landscape. We're going to make it look realistic. Right now, if I press play, you'll see that the landscape, it looks cool, but it's not exactly realistic. We want an extremely realistic landscape, and what we want to do is probably combine multiple materials. So you might want to have a little bit of grass here, a little bit of sand here, a little bit of something else there, right? So we want to make that nice blend and give you the ability to paint using your landscape. So that's what we're going to learn today. And to do that, first thing we're going to do is we are going to right click and we're going to create a new material, and we're going to call this the land material, right? So we're just creating a new material for the landscape. I'm going to double click this first, and we're going to bring back our familiar node, material node. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to right click and type landscape. And you can see that there are a lot of things you can do with landscape, but the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out a landscape layer blend. Now, your landscape wants to have multiple materials, and one of the advantages with Unreal is that you can have multiple textures in one material, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to click on layer blend, and this is what essentially allows us to have multiple different layers in our landscape. So I'm going to create some layers, right? So the first one, let's call it grass, right? I think you need to have a little bit of grass for sure. Then we'll create another one. We'll call this, maybe rock, right? And we'll create another one, and we'll call this, maybe sand, right? So we have 3 layers: grass, rock, and sand. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this. I'm going to press Control C and Control V to duplicate it. Now, you guys so far have heard of the base color, which is basically your base texture. But then there's another thing which you need to hear of, which is the normal. Now, every texture or every material which has a image as a texture will also have a normal. A normal is the depth information. So if you have tiles, the normal map might be something that shows you where the tile dips, or where the crevice in the tile is, or where the height, or where the tile goes higher. So the peaks and the depths are basically what the normal map figures out. It's the bump that the normal map figures out, right? So what I'm going to do now is this layer blend we're going to use for the normal, and this layer blend we're going to use for the base color, right? You'll see what I mean by both of these in a bit. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to right click and I'm going to type texture sample. So let's pick a nice little texture sample for us, right? Let's double click this and let's choose from our starter content. Let's choose some maybe not sand, maybe grass. Yeah, so we've got a little bit of grass here, right? So you guys can see the grass here, and I'm going to connect the RGB of this, which is the total texture, into this, and as you can see, this goes into base color, right? So we've got a little bit of grass here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do texture sample again and I am going to change this to, what's the second one? I think rock. Let's just call it basalt. I don't know what that is, but I picked a style of rock here. I'm going to do that again one last time, right? And this time I'm going to choose sand. I know the third one was sand. I think it was sand. So we've got sandstone here, which should be good enough. And I'm going to connect all 3. So as you can see, when I connect one, the other ones disconnect. So I'm going to connect the sand to the sand, the rock to the rock, and the grass to the grass. So all 3 are connected. Now the normal maps are different, right? We need, it's not the texture we need, it's not this that we need, it's the depth information that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do texture sample again, right? And this time I am going to pick the normal map. So I'm going to say grass, and you can see there's this _n. So _d stands for diffuse. Diffuse and base color and texture, they're somewhat the same thing, right? So don't get confused by that. Diffuse is the actual texture and normal is the depth information. So I'm going to pick out grass _n. Now if you look at this, right, you can see that the grass has fine texture, and you can tell that this is actually a map of heights, right? It works together with the actual texture, right, with the actual diffuse, to create the illusion of height of the grass, right? So that's why we're using normal. So I'm going to put this into grass, right? This is a grass normal. I'm going to send it here, and I'm going to do the same for the other 2. texture sample parameter 2D. I am going to change this to what was it, rock, basalt, whatever that is. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And as you can see, this normal map, you can see it, right? You can see the depth information here as I zoom in, right? So let's do the last one. And here we can change this to sand. Okay. Again, it's the _n files that I'm taking because we need to be very careful about that. So all of this is done, and here's one thing that I want to add, right, before we kind of use this landscape material. I want to make sure that we're able to scale all of these textures together at the same time if we need to. On smaller landscapes, if you have a very small texture, it looks tiling, like you can see the tiling, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are able to manipulate this whenever we want. So we're just going to type landscape layer coords, right, which is basically the ability for us to edit all of these at one time, and we can just plug this into the UV segment, right? So to all of these. This basically allows us to scale all these textures at once. So if I say mapping scale, if I set it to 2, then all of these textures are scaled by 2 in real time. So that's the cool part. I'm just going to save that for now, and let's get back into our level. So we'll go to the landscape. We'll find this this content that we had created. We'll go to materials. We created this land material. I'm just going to drag and drop it in. And as you can see, it's black, right? There's absolutely nothing. And that's because we have to generate the 3 layers that we spoke about. So what we'll do is we'll go into landscape mode, and we'll go into paint. And as you can see, because we had created those 3 layers, all the 3 layers are available here in layers. So landscape, we did sculpting so far. We were able to move things up and down, all those funky things that we were able to do. I just created something, you can't see it perfectly. But if you go to paint now, you can actually paint particular layers. But before you paint the layers, just like in Photoshop, you have to create the layers. So I'm going to press this create layer info, and I'm going to click on weight blended layer, right? So I'm just going to save it wherever the default is, and suddenly your entire map is filled with grass. If I press play, you can see that, as we expect, the grass is there. Now the grass is a little bit shiny, and I think we need to fix that first. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go back to content, go to materials, go to land material. Now what determined our shininess? It was roughness, correct? So what we're going to do is we are going to do a scalar parameter, and we're just going to call this roughness, and we'll set this value to 1. We just want this to be 1, right? So there's no shininess at all. I'm just going to save. Still saving. And if I press play, you'll see that there's no such shininess from the grass anymore, which is a good thing to do, right? So now we want to add these other 2 layers too. So I'm just going to press plus, create a weight blended layer, save it wherever it needs to be saved, and create one more layer for the sand, right? So we've got all of these layers hidden below this. So I'm going to show you what it's like to start painting. First thing, I'm going to move the tool strength a little higher. I'm going to change the brush size a little bit. Now you can see that there are 2 circles in the brush. The first circle, the inner circle, is basically the place where the texture is going to go. And the outer circle is called the fall off. So as you can see, the fall off, right? I can increase the fall off, which means that it's a nice smoothing effect that happens at the corners, right? And I can move the small off, make the small off smaller, which means that, it's not going to be too smoothed out. So let's take this rock layer and let's start painting, right? As you can see, there's this nice little blend that's going on, which is what that material we created is doing. So I can actually, we need a smaller brush. Let's create a small little road for us, right? Let's create a small brush, even smaller. Let's create a road for ourselves. One thing I like doing is I like changing the camera speed, especially when I'm far away. So I'm changing the camera speed to 6. It allows me to zoom in and zoom out quickly. And I'm just going to create a nice little road, right? beautiful little road. Now let's go to the sand. Let's give it some companionship. Let's give this road some companionship. And sometimes this might happen, right, where there's the checkers. That's okay. That's just the engine kind of recompiling the shaders. So don't worry so much about it. And as you can see, we have this nice little blend of textures. Right? Now, if I want to scale these textures, and I've told you before that sometimes you might need to scale these textures, the technique to do that is to go back to your materials, double-click the landscape material, click on your landscape coordinates, and set the mapping scale. Let's set it to 10, right? Which is we're scaling it by 5 times from what it was. So we went from 2 to 10. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. Well, looks like we're done. Now, as you can see, the textures have been scaled. Now, you can notice if you're looking from here on my screen is that there's some bump information. Right? It looks like some things are raised. Right? It looks like on the sand there's some raised. There's a slight raised effect, and definitely on the pebbles you can see that they're raised. Right? That's happening because of the normal maps, and the normal maps are something that we've already set in our landscape material. So very smooth blend, and hopefully you guys have got the hang of creating landscapes